A very warm welcome to everybody who is present here, the panelists as well as the attendees who have come in. Really glad to be here talking about, of course, the exciting space of cross-border payments. A lot has been happening in that space, and we have a few experts here today where we'll discuss about what's new, what are the trends from a business standpoint, what's happening in the regulatory standpoint, as well as from a taxation and compliance standpoint as well, right? And we'll be focusing on service exporters, which also includes freelancers, right? So in India, a lot more businesses are now looking to export not just goods, right, but also services. And by 2030, I think almost it's $1 trillion business, right? Almost more than 50% of all exports are going to be service exports. So it's a very, very important topic to discuss in terms of how payments would work in that space, right? And I have a few experts here to talk about that. We have Ashita Regidi, who is the Director of Policy at Cashfree Payments. Hi, Ashita. Welcome and great to be having you here and looking forward to having the discussion. We also have Vishal Punijar, who is the Senior Compliance Manager at Purushottam and Associates, and he'll be guiding us through the compliance and taxation aspects for cross-border payments, right, for exporters. Welcome, Vishal. Great to have you here with us, and look forward to the discussion. And then we have Shrisha Manakeri, who is a Senior Manager Cross-Border Payments at Cashfree and an expert with respect to Cashfree Payments from a business standpoint. Shrisha, great to have you in as well, and look forward to discussing the business aspects of cross-border payments. My name is Aditi. I head product marketing and strategy at Cashfree Payments. And of course, Cashfree has been in the space of cross-border payments for a few years now. And we are one of the payment service providers that are looking to build innovative solutions to really enable this space, especially for folks like you who have joined in, service exporters, freelancers, etc. So we are really looking forward to having a more collaborative discussion. So if any of you have any questions, right, while we get started, and I have a few questions I want to ask the experts, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to please put it on the webinar chat. We'll pick it up as we go, right? We'll try to pick as many questions as we can. And even if we're not able to cover everything, we're happy to have a more detailed discussion post this webinar as well. Great. And I wanted to also thank SEPC for this wonderful opportunity to work together. I think there is a lot of synergy, and we are really proud to be partners here and enable this for service exporters. Thank you, SAPC, for that. And we'll get started. I think the first question that I have is for Shisha, because we wanted to start from a business point of view. Shisha, tell us a little bit more about what's happening, in the cross-border payment space from business trends perspective, right? What has, worked well? What are the challenges also that exporters and merchants in this space are facing with respect to cross-border payments? We'd love to get your initial point of view from a trends, challenges, etc. standpoint.
Sure. Thanks, Aditi. Thanks, SEPC, for setting this up and helping us bring to this forum. Just to give context, yes, they just introduced me. I'm Srisha. I come with almost 12 to 13 years of experience, and last 5 years handling or consulting exporters, more than 1,000 exporters, especially in the services segment. To kick off with, I'll just quickly walk through top 4 stats that I have come across and what is the current 2023 trends. I hope you all got a chance to go through SEPC recent report. How India, especially in services exports, that how we are doing well. We are already standing at 192 billion this fiscal. And if we just need to see the trends, right, the kind of volumes that currently Indian service exporters are currently doing right now. FY 22-23, we closed at 325 billion, which was a 28% jump from the previous financial year. And this financial year, we have a very ambitious target of reaching 400 billion USD. And the current trends is showing that easily by FY 23, which is the end of 24, March, we will be hitting that 4 billion USD mark. So talking about it, the next point which I have to talk about and help everyone understand, because SEPC has all the base of service exporters members and also follow them. Who are these segments? Like, what are these segments who are getting the most traction and getting global expansion right now. Is no marks for guessing this. Of course, IT services companies, which is computer information telecom. But surprisingly, and also the most growing segments are currently legal, auditing, higher education, accounting, and logistics. They have shown tremendous growth in this particular financial year, who are currently growing. When we talk about segments, where are they getting these opportunities from? Where are they getting their importers from? Again, guess the region. It is US. Like US contributes 62% of these particular exports that are happening, especially on the services perspective. If I add together US, UK, and Europe, it is almost 85 to 88% of the service exports that happens to these three regions, and the rest of the world just takes care of 12%. Of course, we have the new regions like Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Middle Eastern regions that are demanding our services, and our service exporters are not only sticking on to like receiving euros and USDs and GBPs, but yes, they are now going to Southeast Asia, Middle East, and of course, bringing HKD, which is Hong Kong dollars, AUDs, and New Zealand dollars, right? As I was speaking about the foreign currencies that our Indian exporters bring in, uh, of course, like we are coming to the point where we talk about cross-border payments, right? Like if you are an exporter, you are receiving payments regularly, once in a month, twice in a month, it's a financial maze, right? Like it has formidable challenges. Though the traditional method is bank wires or swift payments, you know what all steps that have been involved in that. There are multiple correspondent banking relationships that are involved, which makes it slow and costly. uh, Apart from bank wires, there are other payment modes where you can take payments through wallets or other payment service providers. But when you use their platform, the overall platform service provider fees will itself cross around 2 to 10%. Yes, one important report that I will just leave in before I bring it back to Aditi is the recent report or the latest survey that Swift itself did, is asking our Indian SMBs, hey, what did you prefer? Like, what are the modes of payment that you prefer? And what is that you look for in that mode of payment? And they all said, hey, I look for trust and credibility through transparency. Hence, my banking rails are the ones that I always look forward to. And they always said that uh, rather than speed or use or low fees, I would always prefer the compliance or the regulatory part of the transaction. I want to ensure all these payments come through a compliant way.
Thanks, Shisha. I think that's a very, very important point you mentioned and very interesting insight that trust and compliance, anyway, in all money matters, I think trust and compliance is important, but in cross border, even more so, because the regulatory aspects are also, really, really stringent. You use the word formidable. So I think I'm going to put the question to Ashita, who heads policy, right? So from a policy perspective, Ashita, before we go into specifics for service exporters, that we maybe cover, in the second half of the discussion. I wanted to understand from you, how has the journey been from a regulatory perspective for cross-border payments, right? We had OPGSP, now we have, new guidelines come in. So if you could just walk the audience through the regulatory sort of journey for cross-border payments in the last few years.
Okay, so thanks Aditi, and thanks Aditi and SEPC for having me here. To talk about the different regulatory regimes, basically it varies based on the type of payment and the transaction amount that you're doing. For example, say if you're doing a personal remittance, like you're sending money for an education fee for your son studying abroad, so that happens under the liberalized remittance scheme. For export and import services, you have largely you have two forms. You might be working with your bank for that, or you might be approaching a player like Cashfree for that. So this can be under the OPGSP guidelines, or this can be under the RDA, which is the rupee drawing arrangement. Similarly, say you want to make a bill payment, you're abroad, you want to make a bill payment in India, you would do that via BBPS, which typically happens on RDA rails. So these are some of the different ways in which cross-border payments currently happen. In terms of trends and from a regulatory perspective, how we are seeing things evolving, I think digitization is a target, an important target. For example, A2 forms were digitized recently, which is a form that you usually share in relation to LRS transactions for purchasing foreign exchange. Real-time payments is a focus, even though currently we are seeing more progress in the P2P space rather than the P2M space, but this is another focus. Now, for coming to export and import specifically and the OPJSP guidelines particularly, OPJSP is a scheme which allows like a payment gateway type of checkout experience, but focused on small ticket exports up to the value of 2,000 USD for imports and 10,000 USD for exports. So last year, the RBI came out with what they call the OEIF guidelines export, I think export-import facilitators. And these guidelines proposed increased transaction limits, increased number of payments modes, for example. And there was a consultation with the industry that happened for over a year. And now finally, we have the new PACB guidelines out, which is like a new formalized licensing regime. So whereas Aditi, I'll get into it in more detail later on, but just to give an overview of the space, this is what it's like right now.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Ashita. I think that gives some clarity about the fact that things have been moving in a positive direction, right? The coming of guidelines, of course, OPJSP was there. Now, you have PACB. We'll talk more about that. All of these are positive changes because it essentially means that RBI is also looking at how do we make RBI acknowledges, right, that like Hisha mentioned, that the growth for payments is happening a lot, for exports is happening a lot through service export and so many other new innovative means of export, right? And that's where it's important to have the right guidelines to help scale, right? It's not to deter, it is to help scale for merchants, right? So we would love to, if any questions are there, meanwhile, please, requesting the attendees to please put in your questions in the Q&A. We will take them up with the experts as we go. But my next question is actually to Vishal. So Vishal, we spoke about the market and business aspects of it. Ashita highlighted about the regulatory aspect of it, right? Now, from a compliance taxation standpoint, if you could, help us a little bit about the journey on cross-border that has happened, cross-border payments in the last few years, right? How has the space evolved? And then, of course, in the second half, we'll also take specifics on service exporters, what do they need to take care of? But before that, just wanted to get a high-level view from you, Vishal, on what has been the journey from, a taxation compliance perspective for exporters in the last few years. I hope I was audible. Vishal, we are not able to hear you. Can you hear us? Ashita, can you hear me? Am I audible?
I can
You
hear
are.
you. Yeah, I can't hear Vishal at all.
Vishal, we are not able to hear you. Could you try reconnecting in that case? And while Vishal joins back in, I think we have one question that has come up. So I'll maybe we'll take that question, and then meanwhile Vishal's network hopefully will be better. So this I'll request maybe Shisha, you can take this. So the question here is, if somebody's a marketplace, right? So here the person who's posted is let's say a marketplace. Then the question is, do you need to onboard all the sellers on the marketplace for international payments use case? Would you like to take that, Shisha?
Sure. Done. Vishal, I'll just answer this question before you go.
Yeah, sure.
So thanks for posting the question. Yes, it also depends that, hey, what is this marketplace? What are you taking payments? But usually, if you are just a marketplace who are into a B2B, like if I'm assuming you are a B2B marketplace where you are helping Indian sellers to reach out to importers who are across the globe, we wouldn't be requiring the KYC or onboarding process of the seller, but of course, under the regulation and guidelines that we need to follow when the transactions happen, of course, we onboard the Indian entity, which is you, which is the marketplace, but we would be requiring the transaction level authentications that we need to do to ensure that we whitelist your payers so that any payments that come as a repeat payments, they go in smoothly as much as possible. So yes, we would be needing certain documentation that are required. They are very minimal, which is a general practice any PSP will follow, but we need not like onboard each and every buyers as such. But yes, if we are onboarding a seller in India, we will be onboarding each and every seller. Like it is like Amazon concept. Like if you are selling on Amazon, each and every seller on Amazon who is getting payments individually will be onboarded.
Great. Thanks for answering that, Risha. Also, additionally, if there are any questions that the attendees have with respect to onboarding, KYC, etc., we'll be happy to answer more in detail. Like we have in-house experts who can do that. So do drop us a note, and we will definitely connect you to the right experts to discuss that. We've got Vishal back. So Vishal, are you able to hear me now? Vishal, not able to hear you. I hope you can hear me. Okay, looks like Vishal's network is a bit patchy, so we'll again circle back to Vishal when he joins in. Meanwhile, maybe we sort of go into specifics now. Ashita, since we spoke about the regulatory sort of story that has happened in the last few years, and we have a lot of folks who've joined in, and I'm assuming many of these are service exporters, freelancers who either are in the journey of getting started or are at some stage where they are now looking to scale, right? And I think the new PACV guidelines is something that people are all talking about, right? What does this mean for cross-border payments, right? How should I go about it, right? Who should I work with? Can I work only with banks, or can I also go with payment service providers, right, for enabling my payments? So just wanted to again take your insights, right, for the audience on what, from a regulation perspective, a payment service provider, and again, I'll just also highlight what is a payment service provider for folks who are on the call, right? So payment service providers are not banks, but these are entities such as Cashfree, right, that work with banks in the backend, but they enable the payment process much more smoothly. We'll talk a little more about the value proposition and business aspects of it as well. But meanwhile, Ashita, from a regulatory perspective, could you help us understand a little more about PSCP and how should I go about? How does a company like Cashfree or any payment service provider, how can we help out businesses or sole proprietors or individuals in enabling their cross-border journey?
Okay, sure. So you can actually, in terms of the options, you can work with either a bank or a payment service provider, and I'll focus more on the payment service provider part of it. I mentioned the OPGSP guidelines earlier. So earlier, to enable an export-import transaction, you would have a payment service provider tie up with the bank under the OPGSP guidelines and enable export-import payments. For something like import of services, you would again tie up with the bank and get an approval for the RBI to act as a collection agent. Now, what the RBI has done is that it has taken these two separate regimes and has brought it collectively under a single one known as PACB, which is Payment Aggregator Cross-Border. So anyone who is familiar with your typical domestic checkout experience and the players that provide that kind of an experience, now the same player can also provide you with a cross-border payments experience. So in terms of the benefits of the regime, there are several. Like one is the transaction limits have been increased, whereas OPGSP saw 2,000 and 10,000 USD for imports and exports. Now it has been collectively increased for both to 25 lakhs, which is roughly 30,000 USD. So, and another interesting point is that import of services has also been allowed, which was not allowed under your old OPGSP guidelines. So basically, you don't need to shift to multiple players to allow transactions of different values. Up to 30,000 USD, you can use the same player for that. The second change is in terms of payment modes. This was more relevant for import, of course. So earlier, you could only do it via credit cards, debit cards, and net banking. The new guidelines allow it for all payment modes except for small PPIs. Then another advantage is flexibility flexibility with settlement timelines for anyone who is familiar. Say you need to keep your funds with the PA. You want them to hold the funds until the period of refund, just to make it easier to manage. So then you have that flexibility under the new guidelines. So these are some of the positive changes. In terms, another change that is worth highlighting is in relation to onboarding. Under the PACB guidelines, you will see full KYC. And if in case your buyer exceeds a cap of 2.5 lakhs, then you will also need to do due diligence for the buyers. So your PSP will take care of a lot of these compliances. For example, say payment modes, you can only allow certain payment modes. Your PSP will ensure that say wallets as a payment mode is not allowed, or say that your transactions are only happening within the specified use cases, or say buyer due diligence is required. That process will also be taken care of by your PSP. So this is a summary of the benefits you see, and how the new guidelines would ease things off from an ease of doing business perspective.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashita. I think this again helps clear the doubt that the guidelines are actually, enable in favor of merchants to ensure that their transactions, from a safety compliance standpoint, and having a regulated entity or having a license for this makes it, much more trustworthy for the merchant to work with these players, these payment service providers, right? Need not have to second guess and worry about what happens to my money, right? What happens to my payments? Because you know that this entity is regulated by RBI, right? Is licensed under RBI. So I think that's one thing that you very correctly highlighted for us, right? Vishal, I'm hoping that we'll be able to hear from you this time. Are you? Could you just say hi so I know your voice is coming through? You're on mute, Vishal.
Am I audible now?
It's perfect. Yes, very much. Great, great. So Vishal, I was asking a question around the general, in the last 2-3 years, how has the compliance and the taxation landscape evolved with respect to cross-border payments, right, for exporters? And then specifically, I also wanted to ask a question. So there are two questions basically, right? One is on the general landscape. Second is if I am a service exporter and I'm getting, or let's say I am a freelancer who, wants to get started with providing services internationally, right? What do I need to take care of, right? What are those key things I need to take care of to get started? Of course, to receive the payment, but even after that, right? So the GST aspects, the taxation compliance aspect, if you could help walk us through all of that, I think it'll be super helpful for the attendees.
First of all, sorry to all the panelists and the listeners. My internet is really not working today, so apologies for the same. To begin with the topic, first of all, we have to segregate compliance into two parts. First, Indian marketplace compliances, and then second is global compliances. Let's suppose you are targeting to export your services in USA. So, what you have to comply in India as well as what you have to comply in USA as per their laws of indirect taxes. So as far as GST is concerned, so the prerequisites for any exporter is you must be registered under GST, right? Because as per GST Act, whenever you export services, it is termed as interstate supply. And if you see the specific rule for interstate supply, then you have to compulsorily register under GST. So, Aditi, your question was if you are a startup or a proprietor and your exports turnover is less than 20 lakhs. So your first question is covered here. Irrespective of your turnover is under GST, whenever you supply any exports or services, you compulsorily have to. So there is no point of threshold as regard to exports of services as well as exports of goods. So your next question was to whether there
So if
is
I'm understanding
specific
correctly, then are you saying that as a, if you are doing any service export, right, irrespective of the threshold, GST is a requirement, right? Okay.
yes, ma'am, you are correctly getting irrespective of turnover, whether you are exporting goods as well as services, you have to register with a zero turnover. That means there is no threshold specific for service providers.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Understood. And on
So,
this, yeah, sorry.
for the
Go ahead.
cities, Firstly, it is also recommended to get a registration number because whenever you supply services of exports, right, you use input services any other business expenses. So you have to pay GST under domestic laws, right? So when you registered with GST, so after filing all the GST returns, you can claim that refund. As you are aware that under GST there are two ways to export the services. One is against LUT. LUT is letter of undertaking, which is valid for 1 year. If you obtain letter of undertaking, then you can export services without paying any GST. So all the GST you have paid in India for availing your like your computer, your AC, any infrastructure like your furnitures. So you can take refund of that as well later on.
Got it. Got it. I think there's a question around that also. So I think you are answering that, but kind of restating, right? So Sumit has asked a question saying, is GST payable for service export? So I think your answer to that is, do you want to rephrase it or just summarize it, Vishal? The question is GST payable for service export? So you kind of highlighted
So,
how you need to have GST, but you
right.
can also
So on
see,
the yes,
yeah,
ma'am.
yes,
Yeah, I'm answering the question. So under GST, there are two options to exports. First is exports under LUT, which is called letter of undertaking. In that case, you do not have to pay any GST on exports, right? And the second option is you have to upfront pay the GST on the exports and later on claim the refund of the same. In any scenario, your GST liability would be to be said that under second option, you first have to pay GST and then you can claim the refund of GST as well. In order to promote the exports of from India and to obtain forex more and more, the government have given the benefit to the exporters either to exports against LUT that what LUT is in briefly I can explain that LUT is a document we sign that we will bring forex against these exports of services in India. And the other option was to pay upfront IGST, that is integrated goods and service tax, and then later on we can claim the refund of the same. So you can opt any option, it's up to you.
got it, got it, got it. Thanks so much for clarifying that, Vishal. So there was a question around whether freelancers also have to do that, but I think you've answered that, right? That applies for freelancers as well. Doesn't matter whether it's 20L
Yes,
above or below 20L. The
full
same will
time.
apply for them as well.
Current law now, as per as current law, there is no threshold for service exporters because service exports, as I explained, is termed as interstate supply, and the interstate supply service provider compulsorily have to register under GST.
Got it,
So
got
there
it,
is
got
no
it.
point of any.
Understood. Okay, okay. Thanks so much, Vishal. Thanks a lot. So there is one business question. So Shisha, coming to you. I think we talked about payment service providers and the role they play, right? So here is a question from someone on the cost aspect of it, like because a lot of exporters are used to working with banks, right? So what is the cost comparison of working with a bank directly versus a PSP, a payment service provider? If you could also, meanwhile, highlight what is the value proposition? What does the payment service provider really bring to the table? You could highlight these 2 points, that'll be great.
Sure. Thank you. Before I jump into the answering of this, the question that has been asked, I'll just walk you through, like I was talking about the pointers about the trends and all. Though we all have exporters who are all tech savvy, we understand they're all SMEs in their own fields and they're all in ITITs mostly. But when it comes to banking and when it comes to cross-border payments and especially inward remittances payments coming to India, again, based on the report, 83% of our SMBs, MSMEs, and service export has voted banking rails as their main payment method, right? Of course, it is followed by other payment gateway solutions or solutions like PayPal, where they directly take payments by sending payment links. But when we talk about 80%, which is huge number who are still relying on banking factors, we need to understand where the value comes in. what are all the different components which are involved in receiving a payment through a banking rail. So just taking 2 minutes deep dive on this. So whenever a payment method which is through banks which is used, we call it as a SWIFT payment or an international wire payment. In this international wire payment, when we consider, hey, you have a bank account with one of the banks in India, it can be ICICI, HDFC, or any bank, you provide the banking account details like account number, your SWIFT code in India, and the branch details and all the details to your payer. Now, imagine from the payer side, the payer now has to add these account details in his net banking as the beneficiary, who is supposed to be like, they are supposed to initiate a international wire transfer. They have to initiate a wire transfer, say from Bank of America or Citibank or a HSBC bank in USA to the bank account which is in India. So when we do this, they use the network which is called as SWIFT, which is the international method and the general method that is used, the network, which is very secure. And of course, it is becoming more faster and faster. When the initiating bank initiates this particular transaction because the payer has selected the mode of payment as SWIFT, there is a transfer fee which is involved, right? This transfer fee is set by the initiating bank based on the slabs. It can vary between $25 and it can go up to $75. Whenever this initiating bank initiates the transaction, takes your instruction from the payer and initiates the transfer to your bank account, which is the beneficiary bank account, this wire fees is tagged along, and it is asked to the payer, hey, who is going to bear the fees, right? Like, do you want to bear the fees or do you want to pass on that fees to the receiver who is in India? So depending on that, either the payer himself is bearing or they usually pass it on to the beneficiary. Say, consider if you are receiving $1,000 payment, a 25 or a $50 is already gone even before it is initiated from the initiating bank. Now, not every bank in USA, Europe, UK have direct connections with an Indian bank. They have to use a corresponding bank or an intermediary bank before the transaction moves from that bank to our Indian bank. So there is a correspondent bank to the initiating bank and also a correspondent bank to our beneficiary bank. So there are multiple intermediary banks that are involved and a clearing system in between it. So when the fund moves between these intermediary banks, there is a cost involved because every intermediary bank is doing a service or providing a service of moving this fund. So everywhere there is a fees that is involved, and this fees is very it is not a clear cut or transparent fees. It can go up to hundreds of dollars. It can start up at $5 also, $10 also. So there is no clear cut, hence there is no transparency that is involved. Your beneficiary bank, which is your Indian bank, will only notify saying that, hey, you have received $940 or $920 sent by your XYZ payer. Now we will be converting this fund. So you will get a notification saying that you have received $930 where it was supposed to be $1,000. And then now this $930 will be converted into Indian rupees, right? When this is done, your Indian bank has to pick up a foreign currency exchange. So there is a markup that your banks will pick up, right? And a markup on, say, today $1 is equal to 100 rupees. There is a markup of almost 90 paisa to 1 rupee that they might pick up depending on the rates on that particular day. Say they will do a multiplier of 99, but that doesn't end there. So there is a service fees which is involved when a bank converts the funds, and then the settlement happens. And once the settlement happens, of course, complete the entire loop, there is a compliance bit for it. Like there is an FIRC requirement which you need to close the loop for. So, and banks usually charge from 200 rupees to 750 rupees per FIRC. So if you see here, there are multiple charges that are involved and multiple gaps that are there present right now when an international wire transfer happens. So when you want to calculate, hey, what is my wire fees or what is my international transaction fees, it's not just your currency conversion rate that your bank has provided in India and what is the INR amount. From the starting point, from the initiating bank, the wire fees, intermediary bank fees, and the foreign currency exchange rate and the fluctuation that you have taken, plus the regulatory and compliance part of it, right? There are very high chances the banks hold the payments because they need to go through your documentation, understand understand what are these payments for, your paperwork. There are cases where I've seen the team goes to bank, submits documents in paper, and then only gets their payment cleared. Right. So all these different gaps and charges are there, which is currently faced by our Indian service exporters. While coming to the same comparison with what PSPs like Cashfree can come here and help provide the solution is how can I make this entire international wire transfer method into just a simple local transfer? Right, in India, when you want to do a transfer, you have IMPS, you just add the bank details and IFSC code, and instantly you can make payments. How can we convert this entire wire transfer into a local bank transfer, at the same time work on transparency, which is giving you clear visibility of where the payments are, clear visibility on what is the FX rate, and work on the speed, right? And at the same time, of course, the coverage. We understand service exporters don't want to just work with one country or two countries. There are multiple regions that they work with. That is where PSPs like us come there, where we say that, hey, you are an Indian entity. Though you are an Indian entity, we will provide you a local receiving notional account in USA or in Europe or in UK and Canada. And especially when I was talking about numbers, these three are the major regions where our service exporters are receiving money currently. Say the same scenario, if I flip it and tell you that, hey, now you hold a US receiving bank account. Of course, it is not a real bank account. It is just a notional account, which is hosted in USA, in a bank which is in USA. So the payer now will not initiate an international wire transfer. They do not give a wire instruction or a SWIFT instruction to their bank. They just ask or initiate a local transfer. Like in India, we call it as IMPS or NEFT. In US, it is called as ACH. In Europe, the entire Europe, they use SEPA network. Same thing goes for UK and Canada. They just do a local transfer. By doing so, what happened? This entire SWIFT fee or the transfer fee that is involved goes off. Like it is nullified, like almost ignoring, because mostly local bank transfers are almost zero, right? And when that particular payment moves, earlier in the traditional method, there were multiple intermediary banks that were involved. Right here, because Cashfree comes as a fintech layer in between, there is no intermediary banks. It is just us who is taking this particular payment and moving that to your Indian bank account post currency conversion. So the entire processing fees will almost becomes zero, right? We take that payment on the next business day. We settle this payment post currency conversion. And even when we do the currency conversion, I was talking about transparency. Of course, at every step, once you receive the foreign currency inward to your account, you get notified. And when the payment has hit, you would know that what is the ETA by which you will be receiving this payment into your Indian bank account. And by the time you are getting this payment into your Indian bank account, we will also let you know about the rate that we have picked. And what is this rate? This is the FX rate. And we refer to the main channels like XE or Reuters for this particular factor. So we pick up the mid-market rate and we add the overall fees to it, and then we convert that and settle it to your Indian bank account. So when you see the kind of gaps that we plugged and the number of items that we ticked off is enormous. You are able to save cost. Of course, as I was mentioning, an average Swift cost can vary between 3 to 7%, right? And we bring down that cost like almost 70%. So that is the difference between what is a banking royal and how PSP can come in and help our Indian service exporters to bring this fund. What we majorly want to do is we want you to take care of your subject matter experts and let us PSPs work on your foreign inward remittances.
Great, Shisha. Thanks. Thanks so much for explaining, how the process works and the alternative to Swift, right? Which is a very very expensive mode. In fact, there are a lot of questions that have come in. I'll try to pick as many as we can. Whatever we are not able to pick today, we'll reach out to these folks, right? My only request is that if anybody is putting in a question, if you can put it non-anonymously, so that we can reach out to you in case we are not able to take all the questions over this conversation. I think I'll just start picking up a few questions. Shisha, one is on the limit. is there any limit for receiving the payment? For example, in some cases, the payment amount might be very small. It could be a $50 payment. It could be a larger amount. So do you want to highlight that, with respect to what Cashfree offers? Is there any limit for receiving payment?
Sure. So on receiving payment, there is no lower limit as such. There have been instances where our Indian exporters have introduced this particular solution to their new payers, and they have to do their test payments and not only just do their transactions. Of course, payments like anything which is above $1 or $5, we can accept those payments and transact and also convert and settle those payments to you. As Ashita was mentioning, under the current construct of the OPGSP guidelines, we have a cap on the upper limit, which is the $10,000 limit. So if your invoice value overall is $10,000, we can support up to $10,000 in our current construct.
Got it. Thanks, Shisha. One question which I would request Shita to take, which is, with the new PACB coming in, I think this question is with respect to when can we start transactions under new limits come in? Is there any clarity on that from, the regulators?
Yeah, so under the PACB guidelines, as soon as you seek approval, you can start operating under the new guidelines. So that means because we are an existing entity with an approval, so we can put in our application for the PACB process anytime before April 30th. And as soon as we do that, we can start enabling transactions with the new limit.
Got it. Thanks a ton for answering that, Ashita. I think there was one question which I'll request Vishal to pick up. So this is regarding the SEIS scheme, right? I think the question is on whether this what is the update on the scheme, and if they can take benefits from the scheme. I think you did answer that one-on-one, but will be great if you can highlight that as well.
So as of now, SCIS was effect abolished from 1/4/2020. So there is nothing called SCIS scheme as of now. In Foreign Trade Policy 2023, there is nothing mentioned about it. So as of now, it is abolished. So
Got it. Thanks for answering that, Vishal. One more question which I'll request Srisha to take. I'm actually going to combine two questions. So one is from Pranav Kumar on what is the time period of payment from vendor to us. So I'm guessing what is the time taken end to end for the payment to come in, right? And the second is, how can service exporters minimize fees when receiving payments from international clients? I guess that is an extension of what you mentioned, but if you want to summarize anything there, that'll be great. So I just combined two questions to make sure we can answer both.
Sure. So again, to answer this question into two parts, first we need to understand what is the preferred mode of payment your payer is preferring, basically. So if it is a bank-to-bank transfer, we cannot exactly say when the initiating bank would be initiating or running the batch at their end, because it is at the bank's end to initiate the payments, and at the same time there is a time zone difference. Usually what we have seen is the payments which are initiated especially from USA or Europe or UK, it is the payment when it is initiated from the initiator bank, which is the remitting bank. If they give the instruction in the first half of the day, on the same day itself, the accounts that we have issued, the notional accounts which I talked about, which are hosted in USA, Europe, UK, they will receive the payments on the same day, which is on the T day, or maximum T plus 1 day. But when you see the entire transaction converting and settling it to Indian beneficiary, which is your bank account in India, the maximum it might take is T plus 2. Again, I will stress on the point, we do not have control over the initiating bank's batch processing. So if the account has received the funds, the notional account that we have issued, if the fund receives the fund today, by tomorrow, if it is a working day or a business day, we will be converting that and settling that fund by tomorrow. That's how it works. And of course, on the cost part, I was mentioning about the whole process and how PSPs like Cashfree can come in between and solve multiple points, like taking off intermediary charges, taking off SWIFT fees, there is no multiple markups and service fees like banks do in India, and also keeping the entire process very transparent and clear for the Indian merchant who is you who is bringing this fund. Of course, there is almost 60 to 70% savings on the payments that you bring in when you see the entire markup. It depends that what mode of payment you are currently receiving. Like if you are receiving payments from platforms like PayPal or card payments, the average processing fees itself is 4 to 4.5%. And then there is a currency conversion of another 3 to 4%. So the overall cost starts at 7 to 8%. However, when it comes to cash free, because there is no processing fees and it is only the overall fees that we charge, all inclusive, including the currency conversion, issuance of the accounts that we have provided, and moving the funds from the foreign payer to your bank account, and also issuing the foreign inward remittance advisory, the e-FIRAs, and that too on the next day, including everything. We will be setting up the price for our Indian exporters, which would be anywhere between 1 to 1.5%, depending on the discussions, and that is how much you will be able to save currently.
Great. Thanks for highlighting that, Shisha. There are a few other questions that have come in, so I'll try to pick those up as well. So I think one which I'll again request Ashita to pick up. I'll try to combine two questions here. This is again a regulatory question about, so this is Chetan who has asked this question about whether the merchant has to notify RBI or the local bank or any regulatory body separately if transaction or if they're using the services of a PSP, right, of a fintech such as Cashfree. Is there a need to separately notify? So I think maybe you can take that question. Also, just before you pick it up, I wanted to highlight here that an entity such as Cashfree is not just a regular fintech. It's also in the process of getting regulated even from a domestic payment aggregation standpoint, right? So the processes and everything that the entity will have will be in lines with RBI's requirements, both for PSEB as well as for domestic payment aggregation, right? So there is, while it is not a bank, but there is a added layer of trust because it is working very closely with the regulatory body. But Ashita, I would ask you from an expert standpoint to maybe highlight this answer.
Yeah, so under the RBI guidelines, there is no such requirement. What will happen is that Cashfree as a PSP will acquire the license and necessary approvals from the RBI. The merchant will be onboarded onto Cashfree. For example, KYC will be done for the merchant. So there will be compliance requirements that will come in from that standpoint for the merchant. But beyond that, no need for the merchant to separately inform RBI or anybody else. In terms of informing your local bank, I don't know if there may be requirements from other regulations that apply to you as a business, but from the PSEB guideline standpoint, there is no such requirement.
Great. Thanks for highlighting that, Ashita. I think a couple more questions we'll definitely try to take. I think one is a question around do we get instant notification when the client makes the payment? Right, and this is Devashish, and he has one more question around what is the overall fee and are there any slaps? So, Shisha, do you want to take a lead on this, and then we can, see if other folks also have inputs on that.
Sure. Thanks, Devashish. Good questions. As I mentioned, whenever, because these are bank-to-bank transfers, unlike card transactions or wallet transactions, where as soon as the payer makes the payment, say the issuing bank or issuing card bank is providing the notification, here it takes some time for the initiating bank once the instruction has been issued by the payer. Say if your payer has now added the account details and has marked send, the issuing bank takes up. Unlike in India, where IMPS or instant payments are available, even in the most developed countries like US, Europe, the payments are run by banks on batches. So they run 2 batches, 3 batches on a daily basis. Based on the batch processing, as soon as the payment hits your notional account that we have issued, you will be getting a notification. Of course, you will be getting an email, and also you will have a dashboard where you will have access on real-time understanding of where are the payments, what are the who has made the payment, from which region. All those details will be provided on your dashboard as well. Yes, on the notifying factor, we will notify as soon as the payment hits the notional account, and also after the payment hit the notional account, we'll also notify about your INR settlements, what are the mid-market rates that we have picked, and at the same time, just to conclude the entire loop, the next day you will be receiving the FIRA, the e-FIRA, which is provided by our partner 81 Bank in India under their letterhead, and that will be uploaded in your dashboard, which you can seamlessly and conveniently download it at your convenience. Coming to the fees part, again, as I mentioned, though we call it out particular volumes for this, especially for the SEPC event or the webinar that we are having discussions, we are giving a flat fee. Flat fee is not in the terms of USD, but it is a percentage fee, because if your transaction size is very low, like if the ticket size is very low, if I add a fixed fee, say if I say $25, it will come up to 3% of the total cost, right? So at Cashfree, we believe that keeping a percentage fee will make more sense to you. So the fees, of course, the overall fee would be somewhere around 1% exclusive of GST.
Great. Thanks, Atanshisha. I think we'll take a few more questions as well. So I think there's one, there are a few questions regarding currencies other than USD, right? So I'll just combine them and ask one question on, for payment service providers, right? Is there any limitation on what currencies can, the solution be provided? And maybe specific to Cashfree, you can highlight non-USD, what kind of currencies can we support?
Yeah, on the currencies, being a PSP ourselves and the solution provider for cross-border payments, we support almost 17 currencies currently. 4 currencies through local payment method and the other currencies through SWIFTs, right? Like we support USD, EUR, GBP, CAD, and the other currencies like Singapore dollar, Australian dollar, for that matter, New Zealand dollar, AED, and all, like even Middle Eastern currencies, we support them through the global SWIFT. Of course, we are planning and we are in working progress on adding more and more local rails for the convenience of those service exporters. But if you see the trends, right, like these are the major 4 regions that make payments to our service exporters. Whether you are directly taking the payment from a payer by invoicing them, or if you are a marketplace seller, right? If you are a freelancer on Upwork, freelancer on Fiverr, right? If you are selling on a marketplace, you can easily receive, and most of these marketplaces are either in Europe or US. Their primary mode of payment would be SWIFT, or if you give them a local receiving bank account, they would be more than happy to do a local transfer to the accounts that we have issued, and the funds will be moved by Cashfree to your Indian bank accounts. So if you are a marketplace seller, as a service seller, or if you are a direct biller and taking payments from the agencies or individuals, we will be helping you to receive these funds seamlessly.
Got it. Great. Just one more follow-up question on this, Shesha. So I think we spoke about what role can a PSP play, right? So Pooja here, who's a freelancer, she has a question about how, I mean, as a freelancer, let's say if I have started my journey to let's just start providing services, right? How can I evaluate which solution is best, right? I mean, what are those levers? What are those product level differentiations? Especially since there are players in the market such as Razorpay, Pay Local, Ping Pong, etc. Her question is, as a freelancer, I find it very confusing to decide on the best player, right? So if you could throw some light on what should a freelancer be thinking about while evaluating the product, right? There are a lot of very good products out there, right? How do they evaluate, and how does Cashfree product compare with the other players in the market?
Thank you. Thanks, Pooja, for asking this. So again, as a freelancer or as a growing agency, you have to always figure out that competitive edge. As a sole proprietor or as a freelancer, you have to embrace this cross-border payment platform, right? What I feel is, as I was mentioning, what did our Indian SMEs or SMBs vote for is transparency. Any platform that provides you transparency, transparency provides you trust. When we talk about transparency, it is also about regulation, compliance that we follow, and the kind of fees that we charge. and the visibility of the entire payment methodology, right? Whenever you are choosing a platform, you need to first ensure that, hey, is the trust and security part is taken care through transparently, and do they have tools to show the entire payment journey on a dashboard or on through notifications. And of course the cost comes there. Right now there are freelancers and there are sole proprietors who are working with us. They also consider speed as part of it, and of course we are very much working on that particular part. Like, we want to ensure that as much as instant payments can be delivered at right now. So yeah, transparency, trust, and of course clear visibility of the payment journey for you.
Great, great. Shisha, thanks for answering that question. There is one more specific question which I request Vishal to answer, which is on the FIRC certificate for inward remittance, right? Who is the entity that issues that certificate? There was a question by Peter Matthew. I know you answered it one-on-one, but it may be relevant to other attendees as well. So request you to answer that question.
Really, FIRC certificate is issued by the bank in which we receive the money. So the bank if you are holding an account, so it will issue FIRC.
Got it. Thanks for
Just to add Vishal's point here, being a PSP and being working with an AD1 bank in India, after every transaction, so at a transaction level, Cashfree provides you or issues e-FIRA by the bank, and using that e-FIRA, you can simply ask your beneficiary bank, which is the bank with whom you are banking, to issue the FIRCs, because our banks have already done the half job for you. It is just to complete the loop. You can just submit those FIRAs and get your FIRCs.
Great. Perfect. Thanks a lot for adding on to that, Srisha. We'll take one more question, and then I think we are towards the end of the time. But we'll try to answer some of the unanswered questions maybe directly wherever folks have reached out. So this is regarding the FX conversion that you mentioned, Shisha, right? So the question here is, do you as Cashfree or as a PSP charge any percentage on the FX conversion rate on the settlement day? And which rate do you take into consideration in that case? Like, do you use some web portal, or what is the conversion rate that is considered?
Yeah. Okay, there was echo. So just to help you and to repeat what I said earlier, the FX rate that we pick on the day of settlement, we will be picking up the Reuters mid-market rate, the rates that are displayed on the Reuters. And of course, as I mentioned, the fees that we charge is a wholesome fees. It is a unified fees from the time a particular amount payment has been picked up till the settlement has been done. It is not just that fees is applied only for your currency conversion. It is an overall fees that we apply. If I mentioned 1% is the fees, say if you receive $1,000, $10 is, say for an example, $10 is your fees, and on 990 it will be converted. On that particular day of settlement, the mid-market rate from the Reuters will be picked up, and the settlement will happen on that particular fees. And on your dashboard, we will clearly call out what is the mid-market rate that we had picked up on that particular day of your settlements.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that, Shisha. 1 more minute left, so one more question. Vishal, this is a follow-up on the FIRC earlier question. In the FIRC, what is the registered address that needs to be mentioned? So basically the question is, FIRC needs to mention a registered address, or does it need to mention the corporate address of the entity?
No, it depends upon your what is the status of your entity. If you are a proprietor, then residential address will be sufficient. And if your legal constitution is partnership or company formation, then you have to compulsorily have to your corporate address as well.
Got it. Great, perfect. Thanks for clarifying that, Vishal. We've now completed the 1 hour that we had blocked of people's time. So today we'll have to come to a close. But this was a very insightful session. I think great participation from the attendees as well. Really delighted. So we'll try to answer more of the questions that came in, which we weren't able to answer today. We'll also try, if you'd like to attend more of these informative webinars, do let us know. We'll reach out to you, on WhatsApp, email, etc. Do let us know if you'd like to be part of more such webinars, where we can, provide such insights, information on how to go about your business with respect to cross-border trade, right? So thank you so much, Vishal, Ashita, Shrisha, and the entire SCPC team, the Cashfree team as well. I think a very, very insightful session for me. Also, it was a great learning experience. I learned a lot about, if anybody I know wants to get started on service export or freelancing for outside India businesses, how to get started, right, from a regulatory compliance business standpoint. So thank you so much, and have a great day. And we hope to do more of these and have such interactive sessions going forward. Thanks a lot.